So we're culminating our unit of study on the Holocaust, and we are pleased and honored to be joined today by Mr. Conrad Wiener, who's going to tell us about his experience during the Holocaust.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to commend you for the wonderful, quiet, disciplined way you came into the gym. I want you to give yourself a pat on the back. That's wonderful. That shows a lot of respect for yourselves and for your school. That's great. It's a little bit too warm here. You mind if I take off my jacket? If I promise to stop there? Thank you. That shows you that I was invited here once before. First time I was invited, it was an honor. The second time when they called me back, that's a miracle. But I'm nevertheless glad to be here. As a matter of fact, this is my second week in Kentucky. I understand if I come back one more time, I'll be a citizen. I'm trying to be very brief, but also quite make you understand what happened. I really consider myself more of a child of a survivor rather than a survivor, because I was only 3.5 years old when I was a threat to the Third Reich, and I was marched into a concentration camp. How did I get to speak to you? The honor of speaking to you, I should say. Well, pure mathematics. 3.5 years old, I'm 76 today. I'm one of the youngest, if not the youngest, survivor in this area. Anytime it involves driving, I get it. Anytime it involves talking to a school, I have the honor of doing it, because when I retired from business, I got bored and I became a substitute teacher. Now, I don't know you guys, be honest with me. Who likes to give the sub a little bit of a trouble when you have a substitute teacher? Come on, come on, I know that. I've been doing it for 14 years. But I'm a substitute like you never had before. Why? I don't need the job. I love to work with young people. I don't send you to the principal's office. I don't call your parents. I don't give you extra work. What do you have here? Saturday school, Friday school? I don't even do that. I usually get applause for that. All I do is I hope you speak sign language, because I take you outside. And there are 2 hits. I hit you, you hit the floor. Any questions? Amazing. I never have a discipline problem, and I'm definitely not having one today. Coming back seriously. The school can educate you. You can educate yourself. That goes in your brain. I appeal to your heart. I want you to not stand by when something is going on that is wrong with somebody else. It really all started with bullying. A very famous writer, Elie Wiesel, accepting the Nobel Prize, said that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. So please, do not ever be indifferent in the face of injustice. As I was mentioning to you, I was only 3.5 years old. We don't remember very much when we were that young. However, I was 7.5 years old when we got out of the camp, so some of the things I remember. Most of the things, we were fortunate enough to get to the United States. We lived close to one of my mother's sisters who used to get together Friday night for dinner, and they would share the story. And my mother always told me, don't forget, never again, don't forget. So I got something from that. As I got older, my son brought me a book that pretty much traces the same route that we took going from Romania into the Ukraine where the concentration camp was. When it became a little bit more comfortable, it's never easy. I did a lot of research on the internet. It's a lot of work going down. It was difficult for me to talk about it till, as a substitute teacher, I was working in one of the allegedly best high schools in the country. One of the students remembered that I'm from Europe. Said, Mr. W, I like them to call me W because you can see how people of lesser intelligence mispronounce my name. I got tired beating them up, so Mr. W. I said, yes, I'm from Europe. He said, did you meet Hitler? After I collected myself, I explained to him that, well, Europe is a rather large continent. Besides, Hitler and I were traveling in different circles. So he said, what did you do during the war? I said, I spent 4 years in a concentration camp. True story. Without batting an eye, the kid said, what were you concentrating on? The rest of the class busted out laughing, but that kid had no clue. What did I say? What did I say? Well, I have 2 granddaughters, and that school prepares our leaders for the future. If they're that ignorant, it just so happened that somebody from the Holocaust Center asked me to share my experience, and that's been 7 years ago. I've been sharing my story with over 3,000 people so far. If I only reach one person, that's worth doing. Because the Holocaust was not an atrocity against Jews only. It was atrocity against humankind. There were many priests, many people of mental retardation, homosexuals, that were also killed in addition to the 6 million Jews. What you see on the map right now is the part of Romania where I grew up. It was a small community. We lived peacefully with our neighbors. There was anti-Semitism, but it was pretty covert. Every once in a while they would have a pogrom where they would come in and beat up a few of us and make themselves happy. But when Romania became associated with the Nazis, and I'm very careful to make the distinction between Nazis and Germans, and you will see later why. It really became quite oppressive. We did not have rights of citizenship, although after World War I, part of Romania becoming a country, the condition was to give us citizenship. Therefore, we couldn't own land, we couldn't own factories. So consequently, only the professions were open to us. And first thing they did, they eliminated everybody from the teachers' union, from the lawyers' union, from the doctors' union. That wasn't enough. On our highest holiday, Day of Atonement, they locked up one of the synagogues. Regardless how secular you are, high holiday, on Day of Atonement, everybody's in the synagogue. They blocked the door, set the synagogue on fire. 400 people perished in that one incident. Later on, they started to boycott Jewish businesses. Jewish doctors could only practice on Jewish patients. And we had to wear a sign, yellow star, indicating that we are Jewish. And our stamp was also marked with a derogatory term for Jews. An order came for us to get whatever we can carry and report to the train station. You see a picture of my mother's family. The poorest one, of course, is my mother. But the convoy happened to stop in front of the house where my grandmother lived. Being an old lady, she was tired, so my aunt, who was visiting from Palestine, said, let's go and rest. When the convoy moves again, we join them. Unbeknown to them, the officer told the soldiers to check the houses, make sure that nobody is hiding. They found my aunt and my grandmother. They brought them outside. They shot them on the spot, just to scare everybody away from thinking of running away or hiding. My cousin, who is 4 years older than I am, had terrible nightmares. He witnessed that. From there, we started to go to the train station. I don't know if you've ever seen a cattle cart. They have small windows, enough for animals to breathe, but not for 80, 100, 120 people. In a way, we were fortunate that we got into those carts, because a convoy before us was taken to the side of the river, Dniester River, which separates Romania from the Ukraine, lined up and shot and thrown into the water. Our journey lasted 2 days and 1 night. When the cattle cars finally opened, people were jumping out, begging for water. It is more difficult to live without water than it is to live without food. Romanian soldiers were emptying buckets of water and laughing because people were scooping up anything they can off the floor to get their lips wet. Our journey continued on foot through mud, snow, and I was lucky. In the middle picture, you see there a guy with a white shirt. If you can see it, that's my uncle. He's the one that carried me, because if you cannot keep up with the convoy, you were just shot and left on the side of the road. In the distance, you could see what looked like branches covered with snow or mud. As you got closer, you realized that those were bodies, people that died and were left on the side of the road. Going into the Ukraine, people would line up, and if they saw somebody that had something, coat with a fur color or something, a suitcase that looked, it might be of value, they would buy that particular person, kill him for their belongings. People say, well, why didn't you escape? There was no place to go. There was a bounty on our head. If somebody turns you in, they got money, and you were killed. Even under those circumstances, some young people joined the Soviet partisans underground and escaped that way. There were many uprisings. The most famous one is in the ghetto of Warsaw, which lasted longer than some countries lasted against the Nazis with all their armies. But coming into the Ukraine, our accommodation were less than desirable. Soviet Union, when they occupied the country, they would take the people of military age into their army without any training, would send them in the front lines. That's how I lost my father. I was 3.5, I don't really remember him. They did the same thing with the Ukrainian people. The women were left to work the fields. The barns, stalls where the animals used to be, they were empty. Those were our accommodations. It was cold. They say here that necessity is the mother of invention. Somebody found a barrel. Who knows what was in it before? They found a downspout from a bombed out house. They made a stove that kept us warm and also cooking on it. The people that were able to work, our camp was in charge of cutting timber for fortification for the Nazis. The people that could work in the forest were getting a little bit of brown water, cold coffee in the morning, a little bit of bread. The rest of us were left on our own. Originally, we had some clothing. We were bartering with a Ukrainian woman for food. Eventually, they let us work their fields in exchange for food. I was very, very sick. I couldn't keep any food down. You wouldn't know it now. But people in our barrack would tell my mother, let the kid die, don't torture him. At the risk of her own life, she would climb up on a cherry tree. Everything in the lower level was eaten up already, to get stems and twigs to make coffee, tea for me, that eventually helped me keep food down and made me a little bit stronger. The winter of 42 to 43 was extremely, extremely harsh. People were coming in the morning on a sled, asking me if anybody had perished during the night. As bad as the circumstances were, in our religion, you're supposed to be with a deceased person until such time that they are buried. Well, the ground was too frozen for burial. So they took one of the stalls and made like a makeshift morgue. And somebody was there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The people that were not used to hardships were the first to die, leaving a lot of orphans. With the little that we have, they took one of the barns and made it into an orphanage. My stepfather's brother-in-law was a cantor. That's the person that sings our prayers in the synagogue. Allegedly, they have good voices. He formed a children's choir. They did everything possible to keep the children's minds off the atrocities that are going on around them. The bad as the situation was, ladies and gentlemen, we had a wedding. The groom did not have a shirt, probably bartered it for some food, but he had a tie. He was elegant. I remember Nazi officers coming to inspect our camp. One of them gave me a piece of chocolate. It's like giving you a piece of gold. I had to wait for my mother to come home, make sure that she separates exactly in half for my cousin and myself. She had to throw it away. It could have been poison. They were poisoning food, booby-trapping toys, doing everything possible to kill us. Out of 1,500 people, only 300 of us survived. We came to a point where, when we were liberated by the underground, the partisans, we didn't know, we were afraid to move. They said, you're free to go. Go where? Romania didn't want us back. Germany didn't want us back. So we walked our way slowly from town to town while the international community was trying to decide what to do with us. Oh, I have an interesting picture there. This is one of the pictures that I'm most proud of. I was 1 year old there, and I was wearing a white suit way before Elvis Presley was even born. I was already wearing a white suit, Remember that. Eventually, the international community allowed us to come back to the company, to the country of origin. So we returned to Romania. And it was like you say here, going from the frying pan into the fire, because Romania became a communist country. Anti-Semitism was still alive and well, but it was covert again. I'm not bragging, but thanks to my mother, I was a good student. I couldn't get into college because they had a quota. I wasn't a member of the Communist Party, neither were my parents. And they knew that eventually I would leave the country, so they had no interest in educating me. I learned a trade. I was lucky. Close to where I lived was the first clock factory in the country. I started to work there when the prototype was made. I worked my way up to a supervisory position. One day, prior to this, I need to tell you that my assignment every year around Christmas time was to ask the Romanian government for an exit visa to leave the country. My mother had 4 sisters in the United States that came here before the war, so we had entrance visa. United States would accept us, but Romania would say that you can't get out. They were saying that nobody wants to leave, that things are so good, nobody wants to leave. One day, the director of the factory where I was working, who was the nicest person you ever want to meet in your life, called me to his office. To his right was sitting the secretary of the Communist Party for our factory. On the other side was somebody from Secret Service. You recognize them a mile away. I played volleyball for them. I knew most of the guys. And this nice, kind, sweet gentleman starts to call me every name in the book. You're a traitor, you're a disgrace, we should not have trusted you. And on, and he said, starting tomorrow, you sweep the floor in the factory. No, today, get out of here. 15, 20 minutes later, he calls me back, closes the door, throws his arms around me. You lucky dog, you're leaving for the United States. It was a medium-sized community, but the word spread so quickly. You could hear people in the subway, people in the streetcar. Did you hear about the family going to the United States? Did you hear about the family going to the United States? We were scared to talk. We were scared to say anything because you didn't know who's going to tell the police on you. The first free country that we came to was Austria. I was 23 years old when I had my first real banana in Austria. The relatives in the United States made it possible for us to spend a few days in Vienna, beautiful city, a few days in France, Paris. But I cannot describe to you in words how great it was to pull in the harbor and see the Statue of Liberty. In Romania, we thought that the streets in the United States are paved with gold. There were rumors that if you buy gasoline at the same station for a number of years, you get a free car. Instead, I was young, didn't speak the language. I was silly enough to take French in high school instead of English. So when I came to the United States, I knew 3 words of English. I'm very proud to tell you they were clean. The dirty words I learned later. But Uncle Sam was very nice to me. He gave me an entire year to learn the language before I was drafted into the Army. Fort Knox, Kentucky, freezing cold. And the Army has what they call intelligence tests. Speaking several languages, the fancy words in English had a root to either Latin or German. So I did very well on vocabulary. I did very well on math. But on simple questions like how many players in a baseball field, I had no idea. I played soccer and volleyball. Football, what's a touchdown? How many points? I had no idea. So the camp overly, the intelligence officer, which is an oxymoron really, wanted to know how can somebody do so well in language and math and not know these simple questions. So he realized after meeting with me that was a language problem. So they gave me language test. First test they gave me in Romanian, which I was educated in. 50 question, true, false. Second test they gave me the same 50 question translated to the German, which was the first language that I spoke. By the time I took the test in Russian, in French, and in Hungarian, I could have taken it in Arabic or Japanese or anything, because they were the same questions translated. If A was correct, then one is correct all over the place. So they were so excited, they decided to send me to California to the language school. Imagine the trip from frozen Kentucky into beautiful sunny California, just great. Only to find out that I cannot get into the school because I was not a citizen. So they kept me in Fort Ord for advanced training. And then the Army, in their wisdom of all the places in the world, decided to send me to Germany. It sounds terrible, but it was a beautiful experience. I learned that you cannot brush everybody with the same. I learned to differentiate between the Nazis and the Germans. I speak the language, I knew their literature. I could not believe that everybody was brainwashed, and I was right. I formed some lasting friendships. One of the people that I became friends with was a salesman. The people that he was selling to had these tremendous Christmas parties. He arranged with my commanding officer to get time off, took me with him to these tremendous parties, and introduced me as his brother. We even looked alike. He knew full well that I'm Jewish. Another friend that I had was a coach for a swimming team for the young German Catholics. He asked me to join their team. I told him that I'm here with the American Army. He said, that's okay, we can make time for you. I told him that I'm Jewish, and I thought that I just dropped a big bomb. He said, in that case, I insist that you come and meet our people. We became friends. I played table tennis for them, and his mother lived across the street from our barracks. Every time I didn't like what they had for lunch, I would call her up, Oma, Grandma, I don't like my lunch. You have something that I would like? Oh, come over, we'll fix something up for you. Those were the Germans as opposed to the Nazis. And I have to tell you, very many Gentile people risk their own lives hiding Jews, hiding Jewish children. There's one story that stands out in my mind. I was fortunate to go visit Poland, visit all these camps in Auschwitz and everywhere in 2009. There is a small town, Krakow, in Poland. A student priest saw a Jewish woman almost beaten to death in the street. He saved her, took her to a friend's house, and they got her back to health. One of the people later on Jewish family, knew that they were going to go to the camp. They thought they were going to perish. So they asked their neighbor to watch their son. Well, the neighbors fell in love with the kid, went to the priest trying to convert him into Catholicism. Forgive my accent. The priest said, we really can't do that. They trusted you with their most precious possession. If they don't come back, we'll talk about it. Next year, the same situation. As fate would have it, the parents survived. They came back, claimed their child. Later on, that lowly priest from Krakow, Poland, became John Paul II. How quickly good deeds get repaid. How quickly. It's very sad that the Nazis had that extermination in them. The extermination camps were horrible. They had one camp in Tereznik, Czech Republic, or Theresienstadt. It was a model camp. The Red Cross realized that so many people are leaving and nobody is coming back, so they wanted to inspect the camp. The Nazis were so great in deception, they allowed the camp to put on a play making fun of Hitler. The role of Hitler was played by a child. The boy that did not get the role was actually fortunate, because as soon as the Red Cross left, they killed everybody. I have pictures over there. I saw the original in a museum. That, like in our camp, parents did everything possible to keep their children's mind off the atrocities going on around them. I made an effort to find the children's name and put their date of birth. I didn't want them to be totally lost. If you remember nothing of my presentation, please remember that if adversity does not kill you, it makes you stronger. Oh, I have so much homework. Oh, I can go to the mall. Oh, I can do this and that. That's nothing. And what hurts me the most, that genocide is still going on today. It's no longer called the Holocaust, from Greek, destroyed by fire. It's called ethnic cleansing, genocide, and so forth. A very famous philosopher, and I quote, if you don't learn from the past, you're ready to repeat it. So please do not ever be standing by when something goes wrong, when some injustice is being done. I'm close to the time, so if you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them. If I don't know the answer, I will do just like your teachers do, just make it up. Because if you would know the answer, you wouldn't ask the question. Please, not everybody at the same time. Yes?
Do you have any long-term health effects that happen because of the Holocaust?
Personally, I was lucky. Because of malnutrition, I had a lot of trouble with my teeth. And I have a condition that flares up every once in a while with my eyes. But a lot of people had psychological problems. My stepfather was very depressed. Why? He witnessed his only child, a baby, being killed, his head being smashed against a tree because he was crying while a Nazi officer was stalking. My mother had the support of her sister and brother-in-law, so it's like today you would call it group therapy. A very famous writer, Shlomo Levi, committed suicide. He could not live with himself knowing that so many people died. So it affected everybody different. I was only 3.5 years old, so I didn't know any better. Not everybody at the same time, please. Yes?
How did your mom know that the chocolate was poisoned?
I'm sorry?
How did your mom know that the chocolate was poisoned?
They just knew it from other cases. They didn't want to take a chance. It could have been perfectly fine, you know that, but they wouldn't take a chance because of other cases. I kept asking her that. Plus, I always remember being cold and hungry. And I kept asking her, you know, if we would have had that chocolate, I never let her forget it about it. Anything else? Well, as I was telling you, in Romania, although I was a good student, and my mother pulled my ears every time I didn't do my work, that's why they stand out like President Obama's. But I couldn't get into college. If I keep my nose clean, I would stay out of jail. In the United States, thanks to Uncle Sam, I have 2 degrees. I had a scholarship at Indiana University. Because of my language background, I finished 4 years in 2 years. They did such a good job that UC gave me a full scholarship, the Masters of Business Administration, 2 degrees. In Romania, my future would have been very much in question. In the United States, I have 2 sons. They're both college educated, both on their own. There are no boomerang kids in our house. And I already have a return on my investment. 2 wonderful granddaughters. 50 years, only 1 wife. Can have 2 of everything. But I have a very nice daughter-in-law. After my first speech, which was over 7 years ago, my son brought my 2 girls, and after I was finished, the next day, my older granddaughter, who was about 10 years old at that time, wrote me a beautiful poem, which I'm trying to find here. Okay, this is very interesting. The Germans were tremendous bureaucrats. By the insignia that you wore in the camp, they knew whether you are a prisoner, political prisoner, homosexual, or a Jewish. And they were all these insignias. So the people that tell you today that it never happened, all they have to do is go through the records that the Nazis themselves kept. There's a picture when I got out of the camp. Look how skinny I was. A teacher took interest in me. Maybe that's why I married a teacher, I don't know, in the back of my ground. Prescribed what today would be physical therapy. I had to do push-ups, I had to run, lift weights, 2 buckets of water, which eventually helped me get stronger and survive. But you have a tremendous opportunity in this country regardless how bad things look at this time. Take advantage of it and have an open heart. Do not stand by when injustice is done. I will give your teacher my email address. People are embarrassed to ask questions sometimes. If you email me, I'd be more than happy to answer your questions, because it's very important. You are the last generation to see a survivor. Thank you for your attention.
To hear actual testimonies of people that were there, and it's pretty cool to hear it how it really was and how people actually saw it since they were part of it.